What's up, everybody? We are back with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time tonight for the Monday night two-game classic slate on DraftKings and FanDuel picks, lineup advice, strategy. We're here. We have the Panthers and the Saints. We have the Browns and the Steelers. Two games tonight. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. If you've been with Occupy Fantasy prior to this season, you know who the guest is today. If you are new here, if you just found us this season, you won't know him, so let's introduce him. This is Jack, architect of the lineup builder powered by DFS Magic, and an absolute short slate killer, as we'll talk about here in a second. Jack, what's up, man? Good to see you again.
Hey Brian, back at it again, and as we'll talk about, very excited to be doing this early in the season, and with the teams and the players we got on this slate. So, yep. So like Brian said, I'm the developer for the lineup builder. If you all using that, I'm in the Discord whenever you need to ask questions, along with Brian. And yeah, let's get into it, man.
Yes, so this slate is ultra interesting. So the agenda for this show here is going to be a little longer than the normal Monday and Thursday videos that you guys see from me, the Showdown specific videos, because we will cover some high-level strategy for two-game slates, but don't worry, we'll get to the picks, we'll get to the low-owned plays, we'll get to the strategy. Don't worry about it. So what we're going to do is we'll talk about, really quickly, Jack's accolades and why short slates have been so successful for him. We'll talk about high-level two-game strategy, because before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this particular slate, you need to know how to build lineups for these types of slates in general. We'll go team by team, notes, injuries, and maybe some plays that we like for each side. And then based on that high-level strategy that we'll talk about here in a second, we'll get into slate-specific strategy and how that changes for this particular slate. So, Jack, I'm actually going to pull it up here on my side, and this is one of your more recent wins. This was your 58K win, two-game slate, Josh Allen, which normally is the bane of your existence, but you did win 58K on a Josh Allen two-game slate. You actually talked to me before that slate, and you said you hate two-game slates. You still won it. This was a check mark for you on the bucket list. You have won a four-game slate GPP of 50K or more, three-game slate, two-game slate, and obviously single-game slates. So why don't you just talk to me really quickly why you think you are so successful at short slates?
Um, well, like you always say, you gotta be lucky and good. But I think working with you to channel some of the showdown strategies that we know work there into the short slates, and so treating short slates more like a showdown than a main slate, right? For example, as we'll get into, playing defenses against opponents, the amount of salary you can leave on the table. You can get a little looser with the types of correlation, and frankly, just embracing uglier lineups at the end of the day. I think that's one of the biggest things you have to remember with this.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that
absolutely.
one, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say this lineup was a beauty. The max correlation on FanDuel, this was a 4-2 stack. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was this one a late swap? Do you remember?
It was. I had Adams in there, and yeah, and I guess that's the other reason why maybe we're successful at this kind of stuff is we actually check our lineups before the late games lock. A lot of people don't. Yeah, so I had it looked good. I had one low owned guy. I forget was it Knox or the running back? One of the Buffalo guys
Yeah,
was
this was
like
Singletary.
legit.
This was and we'll talk about this here in a second too. But it's Singletary at 22%. This one actually had zero guys under 20% owned, which was interesting to me. Which goes to show that, as we'll talk about here in a second, that you can get unique not only just with ownership but by your construction itself.
Yeah, and I think so. There was a bunch of people with the same, like 25 people with the same players or PMR remaining in lineup, and I swapped off Adams for Jones. Figured he'd be low round, and sure enough, I think it was just one other duplicate or two maybe. But yeah, man, that was a nail biter. It was a good one. So yeah, I think it's a good example of the kind of lineups we like to build. But to your point, we don't have to deal with Josh Allen today.
Yeah, yes, that is true, and this is just a horrible slate overall for player talent, and that will allow us to leave a lot more salary. So, in general, let's talk about maybe some tenets of two-game strategy, high level. I think first and foremost we have to talk about game stacking. Let me pull up DraftKings back on my side here really quickly. Get your win off the screen. Sorry, Jack. But game stacking is ultra important. That's number one. And when you look at even in small field GPPs, 500 players or less, we see at least a 3-by-1 game stack. So two players with the quarterback, one from the opposing team on two game slates. But a vast majority are of this 4-2 variety. Four guys from one team, two from the other. Maybe talk to me about why it hits so often, why it's so important, and why we think the field doesn't do it enough.
Well, the field doesn't do it enough because they're, extremely projections focused, right? And on a main slate, that makes sense. There's so many players available to you, you're going to find the guys that are, underpriced for their opportunities as the model does. But with less players to choose from, frankly, there's just not as many good situations. And so then that's where correlation becomes more important, right? So if a crappy quarterback happens to throw a touchdown to a 5% owned tight end, there's just not a lot of other, chances on the slate for other tight ends to score. Even if there's a really good player, if he doesn't get in the end zone, a bad, quote unquote bad tight end that doesn't have a big name can actually outscore like a Travis Kelce or something like that. And then the other aspect of correlation is the opposing team, right? So sometimes in these short slates, there's one game that scores more points than the other one, and that makes it very likely that you're going to have players from both of the teams in that game be on the winning lineup. Versus a main slate, you have so many teams that it just kind of tries to matter less. And I think you'd agree that's probably similar to Showdown in that mindset, right? With the correlation of opposing teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just in Showdown, it's a one game setting where anything can happen. A 2K guy could outscore a 12K guy at positions. And the same goes for a two-game slate. And obviously, the more games you have in a slate, the less and less likely that is. So that's number one, game stacking. And again, nothing is too crazy on DraftKings when it comes to the largest contests, smaller contests, and really for the tenants that we talk about, you can scale those based on the contest size. Next is salary remaining. And Jack, in smaller GPPs, 500 players or less, generally, this is very general, this is not this slate, very generally, you're using most of the salary in your smaller contests. There's no need to get that crazy. But in larger contests, in the screenshot I showed of your 58K win with Josh Allen, that was $1,300 left on the table, and that was on FanDuel. And honestly, not that out of line for what we've seen for typical short slate winners.
Yeah, and I think that you bring up a great point. Like you said, I think we're going to get to the using low owned plays next. But that lineup I won with, like you said, nothing under 20%, but I left more than 1,000 on the table. And over the years, I think we've seen that's on these shorter slates. That's generally a pretty good rule of thumb. If you're wondering whether a lineup is unique or not, if you're leaving at least 1,000 on the table on either site, you can generally assume that it's either going to be unique or very low duplicate. And today, right, as we'll see, you can leave a lot more than that. And really, when you're thinking about this, looking at your lineups, don't think about just like, oh, I have to use this much or else. Try to look at the lineup and look at the swaps you could make and say, can this lineup win, right? Like if you've got like a third string running back and you could just swap it up to Nick Chubb in the same lineup, that might be a stretch. But like if you've got a wide receiver 2 and you could swap up to some wide receiver 1 on another team, you could still get there and say, you know what, this guy can outscore this guy on this day. So that's really how you should look at it when you're thinking about like, am I leaving too much salary on the table?
That is absolutely the best way to look at it. And oftentimes we have that on maybe like a Josh Allen slate, right? Where it's like, oh, can this $5,400 or this $6,400 quarterback outscore Josh Allen? Probably not, especially if it's a scrub quarterback. And if you leave enough to upgrade, you'll probably lose that way. But if it's enough, let's say there's a $2,000 price difference and you leave 1,800, you can't necessarily upgrade. And while 1,800 looks like a lot on the table, you can't upgrade to the most important position. So that is a great way to look at it, is who can I upgrade with this extra salary and see if it makes sense. Finally, we do have the low owned aspect. And like you said here, in this winning lineup that I have on screen, 0 guys under 20%. Typically, we see at least 2 in the large field contests. And typically that's what we aim for. Smaller contests, we almost always still see 1 in 500 players or less GPPs on both sites. And I think this just goes back to the uncertainty and the volatility of projections, Jack, and getting unique.
Yeah, exactly. And so to summarize for everyone, right, it's correlation, leave salary, and use a low owned player, at least 1, maybe 2. And I think Brian, you're looking a lot more at some of the smaller field, higher dollar contests these days, and maybe you want to talk about, do you have to embrace all of those, or just one of those, or 2 of those, or is there flexibility there?
Well, the nice thing is you can embrace all of those and still not have what you may consider a bad lineup. You can have really, really powerful lineups that are unique and different that other people just aren't playing, by playing a 4x2 or 4x1, by playing one sub 20% guy, by salary is the one that's the one I would leave alone the least, or leave alone the most when it comes to small field contests. I wouldn't necessarily try to leave more on the table. Really, for me, it's just the correlation in the one guy under 20%. That's enough for smaller contests.
And especially DraftKings, right? We always got to cite that crazy one. How many players were there in that one? Was it like a Cleveland? Wasn't it Cleveland Pittsburgh?
It was Cleveland Pittsburgh. In fact, it was a playoff slate, and there was a 6-2 winner. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lineup spots on DraftKings. 8 guys came from one game. 6 on Cleveland, 2 on Pittsburgh. I think it was 6 on Pittsburgh, 2 on Cleveland,
Yeah.
and then one random one-off guy from the other game. So there is a difference here. FanDuel, you can only play 4 guys from one team. DraftKings, you play up to 6. And that is another strategy where you can play up to 6 guys on a 2-game slate. And typically you would never do that, but it actually is. I would say it's plus EV, Jack, because the field is just definitely not doing that.
No, it's one of those ones that it doesn't win that often, but the field it wins probably far more often than the field does it. And I think in that one, if I remember correctly, it was a defense versus all the Steelers, right?
Yes, yes, it
And,
was.
and guys, so we talk about this all the time. I think Brian talks about it in Showdown, right? Defenses get a pick six, play them against a quarterback. Now the quarterback's down and has to throw. The same thing applies in a 2 game. It looks ugly because you're used to looking at a main slate lineup and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to play my defense against 4 guys in the same team. But if that defense gets a pick six, now your quarterback's thrown to all those guys in your team, and people in the field are, they're not going to totally avoid it, but it's another way to get unique, is to do stuff like that.
Absolutely. All right, so just to summarize, we got correlation, we have low owned plays, we have salary, 3 tenets of short slate, football, DFS. Now, let's get into this slate. Carolina, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland. And I'm supposed to stay on DraftKings here for a second, Jack. And there we go. All right, and I'm going to start with the first game, New Orleans. I'll just talk about some of the injuries, impacts, maybe some situations, and you can make some comments, Jack. So New Orleans, really no major injuries here. Kendre Miller, the backup running back, may be back this game, missed week 1, rookie running back. That would probably put a dent into Jamal Williams' workload, who we project pretty highly as far as ownership goes. But really, no. We had Derek Carr at quarterback. We had the 3 main receivers: Olave, Thomas, Shaheed. I even have seen some optimal lineups, Jack, that have included all 3 Saints receivers. But just thoughts in general on New Orleans on this slate.
Like you said, I think this one's pretty straightforward. We know who's getting the ball, and who's going to be on the field. I am looking. Looks like Foster Moreau played half the snaps last week. I want to see if he actually got targets. The running back uncertainty is a good point. I mean, we figure probably Jamal Williams will still get a lot of carries, right? A lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and just to that note, Juwan Johnson's 4,100 on DraftKings, Taysom 3,900, Foster Moreau min price 2,500.
Yeah, so Moreau was not targeted, so he must have just been a blocker. Yeah, Taysom Hill. I mean, what do you do with that? He always has a potential to ruin a slate. Do you see him getting owned a lot? Do you see him actually getting opportunities now that his whisperer Sean Payton isn't there?
He did have a red zone target last week. It was a design play. Not as many opportunities that we've seen in years past, but we can always get a Taysom game, especially in prime time for sure. But you have Njoku, Freiermuth, Jawan, Hurst. Like all these guys assuredly will get more opportunities. But Jack, you can't tell me, despite being Taysom haters as we are, that at 3,900 on DraftKings, not sure his FanDuel price, but at 3,900 on DraftKings, you can't tell me that he doesn't have the possibility to lead the slate in scoring given his skill set.
He's 5,500 on FanDuel, which is they're all dirt cheap. And let's be honest, these tight ends are all bad. I mean, Freiermuth is like the biggest name, but they all have really low floor. So to your point, anyone that gets in the end zone could easily be the optimal tight end.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to Carolina. Really poor showing for them last week. Really poor showing for them in preseason DFS. So the industry is going to be down on them. The field is going to be down on them. Collectively, as a team, they're going to have the lowest ownership tonight. Running back, Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard split pretty decent work last week. And I think a lot of people were maybe somewhat surprised, but Chuba Hubbard was getting in the game early and often, spelling and complimenting Miles Sanders. The biggest injury note is that DJ Chark is expected to be back. He missed week 1 with a hamstring injury. Frank Reich said that Chark will be on a snap count. In his absence last week, it was Mingo number 1, Thielen in the slot, Terrence Marshall Jr. getting a ton of run on the outside. So, Jack, I would think that Marshall and Chark are splitting the outside work. Mingo and Thielen are locked in here. And Laviska Shenault, who I know a lot of people loved coming out of college, they had a lot of design plays for him late last season. They had a lot of design plays for him in week 1, too. So, at 3,100, he's another guy that could get a couple receptions, house one. But in all, a very low-owned wide receiver room for this team.
Yep. Just one note on this one. I think you mentioned that Chark and Marshall likely split, and so if you're using the lineup builder, that's a place where we recommend probably like a max 1 type of rule, right? You bet on they're gonna compete for snaps, and only one of them might be optimal. Other than that, though, yeah, I think the Hubbard sticks out as very low owned, and he's kind of expensive, at least on FanDuel, for his perceived role and the projections we see on other sites. So that's an easy way to get different.
Yeah, he's $200 more than Jalen Warren, who Warren was being drafted higher in season-long leagues. A lot of people expect him to have a bigger workload in general, so just going to be low-owned in general. And to your point about Marshall versus Chark, the idea there is that, okay, maybe one of these guys, maybe Chark is healthier than expected, plays a lot more in the game, or not as healthy as expected and plays way less in the game. The most likely outcome is them not playing 50% of the snaps each. Someone's going to play more than the other, so why not build that into your rules when building lineups? All right, on to the second game, Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Amari Cooper downgraded, not expected to play after re-aggravating his groin in Saturday's practice. That leaves Elijah Moore, Donovan Peoples-Jones. It gets really thin after that, my God. And then at running back, Nick Chubb, $8,500 on DraftKings. This is going to be, you and I think, the record for ownership on a two-game slate for one player.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other sites are projecting the 60s. It's too low. I mean, if you try to build a lineup for this slate and you don't use him, it's almost impossible to use all the salary. As we know, the field would rather light their money on fire than leave salary. They're gonna play Nick Chubb. We think 80 to 85% on both sites. I mean, it's just too easy, right?
That is crazy, man. 85% for one player. Like, what are you gonna do with him?
I'm not sure. I mean, I can't go zero. I'll probably just run it and see what happens, and I'm guessing it'll end up around 40, maybe half. So maybe I'll shoot for something like that. I don't know. That's my initial thought, but I haven't decided. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's one of those spots where you just in smaller contests you just play him, right? Just plug him
Yeah.
in. But I don't think you have a choice but to be underweight in the large field, right? Because the alternative is you play 100% and you get what 10, 15% leverage on the field. That's not enough to play a guy who in a game where he could just not produce or get injured and you just beat 85% of the field.
Yeah, and you bring up an excellent point with contest selection here, and that is a really good way for folks to make lineup decisions. Is like you're thinking about playing 150 max or 20 max in a large field, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with this 80% on guy. You can just go zero if you want in 20 lineups, or say if you're building 150, go way under the field, and then you hedge your bet and go find a smaller field contest, like Brian said, play Nick Chubb in all those lineups, and that way you still give yourself a chance to win because you're not competing with 500,000 other people that also played Nick Chubb.
Exactly. And if he does fail, you're obviously looking great in the largest contest. But if 95% of people have him in smaller contests, you're still live there too. That's the beauty of it when you have a guy that is that highly owned. So
Now that's the question. In those small high dollar contests, do you think he hits 90% owned?
I don't know how he's not like 95, 99%. I truly don't know how he's not.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Pittsburgh. Shocker, another wide receiver injury just to make this slate even grosser. Deontay Johnson hurt his hamstring in week 1. He is out this week. We have George Pickens, Allen Robinson, the electric Calvin Austin at 3,500 filling in for him in 3 wide receiver sets. Najee and Jalen Warren splitting snaps in the backfield. Freiermuth. Really, it is Deontay Johnson here. But this goes to the larger point, which is pretty important for this slate, is salary is going to be basically non-existent just because of the quality of the players, but also because we have those injuries to Amari Cooper, to Deontay Johnson.
Yep, I think Austin sticks out. He should get basically a full-time role on the outside there. The Warren Najee Harris split is interesting to me. Like you pointed out, another site's optimal lineups show Warren his points per dollar looks good. Does Najee Harris go a little low here on this one?
I think he might. If salary wasn't an issue, he definitely would. Like if salary was an issue, he would 100% go lower and probably even lower owned than Warren itself. Because people are going to jam salary, he might not go that overlooked. But I think on this slate, compared to other slates that Pittsburgh would be on in a different universe, he will be lower owned than that hypothetical universe situation.
Yeah, and now let's talk about another little 2-game, 3-game ism. Multiple running backs from the same team in the same lineup. This was probably the best example tonight. If you're going to do it, it'd probably be these two. So what are your thoughts on trying to use that, just letting it happen, or outright blocking it tonight?
All right, so this is what I'm going to do here. Let me, in this professional operation that I have going here, I'm going to full screen our lineup builder, occupancyfantasy.com/lineup builder. Let me make sure this works on the screen for you guys. Perfect. There we are. All right, and if you want more information, the link is in the description below. This is Jack's baby. He built it. Can answer all your questions about it. really, because Jack plays a lot of short slates, a lot of the features were built to accommodate the short slate features that we talk about. And I ran this. First of all, one point, Jack, is I tried to build 300 lineups with a $48,000 salary to $50,000 salary. I could not build 300 lineups using my rules because it's just not enough combinations because the salary is so low. I've moved it down to 45,000. Finally got 300 lineups just to see what's possible. Uh, how low can you consider going in lineups today in salary?
I don't have an exact number, but I did some early runs. I think up to 5,000 is fine. Again, I think just making sure you look and see who you can swap to. Um, a good example, right, is with the running backs. Like if you've got let's say you've got like Jalen Warren and Chuba Hubbard in a lineup, right? And you have like enough salary in there that you can upgrade one of them to Chubb. That seems a little thin to me just because they're both in shared roles, kind of second fiddle, right? But if you got like, Miles Sanders and Jamal Williams, or Miles Sanders and Najee Harris or something, right? Or, that, for example, you might be able to convince yourself, hey, those guys could actually outscore Nick Chubb outright, and it's okay to leave that much. So, with like your point about quarterbacks, I think any quarterback could be the optimal on this slate, even the horrible Carolina offense, right? Just because these guys have such a low floor. So, yeah, man, I wouldn't block a 5,000 lineup. I'll probably look at them though. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm just looking here. I think you would probably have to set some sort of custom group of like max X guys under salary Y or something like that, right? Because if not, the lineup I have on screen is multiple $5,000 lineups that could upgrade the Chubb, but it has like Jerome Ford, Rashid Shaheed, Jonathan Mingo, Miles Sanders. Like that's probably too thin on the slate. But just looking at it in a vacuum, it doesn't look that bad. Can it outscore? I don't know. Probably not because of Jerome Ford, um, but if it has Jerome Ford, you're betting on him outscoring Chubb anyways, right? Like if you have Jerome Ford in the 5K lineup, you're already betting on Chubb being hurt or Ford somehow outproducing him. So that lineup actually makes sense to me with Chubb's backup in it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And another way to do it, instead of trying to pick a salary number, is you just set it really low, and then you limit the amount of kind of trash guys in the lineup, right? So you can make a rule that's like, I'm just looking at FanDuel Flex here. So um, we've got Thielen 17%. There's a big breakdown to Taysom Hill at 10, and there's a handful of guys that are under 10. So you could set a rule and say, max one under 11%, right? And then you just let it do what it does and use how much salary it wants, but you at least you've built a lineup that you're only using one sort of trash play, so you're making sure it's not like too crazy.
Absolutely. And actually, I was doing that on screen so you guys could see how the custom rules work if you're not a lineup builder member. So let me go to the other point that I was ultimately going to make here is, and you were talking about multiple running backs in the same lineup, Jack. And these are the lineups I built earlier, 300 lineups with just a handful of rules. Notice that since Jack can't see this, although we are a professional operation, we are not that professional to where Jack can see what's going on. Some of the top lineups that I built by projected OF index have Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders. Some have, let me see if I can find another example here, Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford. There are others that have Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, Saints defense. To me, on these short slates, I think it's a very smart rule, and you're going to beat other people who build kind of lineups like we do, but don't put as many rules in. You're gonna have more EV lineups than them. To me, Jack, you're the short slate expert. You tell me. I would probably make a rule max two of the quarterback plus both running backs from the same team. So max two of Young, Hubbard, Sanders. The idea being that if Young gets there, probably both running backs don't get there. And if both running backs get there, the quarterback probably doesn't get there. And then alternatively, I would probably do max two of both running backs from the same team and the opposing defense. Yes, they can grind it out and both guys get there, but the odds are the opposing defense isn't going to get that many points. So those are the two rules I try to make when it comes to running backs.
Yeah, I'm giving you the credit on those. I steal those from you ever since you started implementing them. They make so much sense. To your point, the field is just jamming projections. They're not going to set rules like that. They probably even can't, but we can, and we're going to. So, yep, that makes sense to me. And like you said, running back versus defense is okay here, right? Quarterback versus defense is okay here. Quarterback and a running back is okay here, even though it's maybe not things you do in a main slate.
Yep, exactly. Would you say a max two of Young, Hubbard, Sanders opposing defense? Like could that hit it all? Or would you,
Yeah,
or would you ever play like Young, Chuba, and Saints defense? Because I guess that's the one that would be excluded.
No, I've I've learned enough, man. If you have to ask, you probably don't block it.
Yeah,
That's my. So
so true.
I think what you said originally makes sense to me. You'd have two separate rules, and you could end up with quarterback running because again, if they say there's a pick six or fumble six, and then
Yeah,
Bryce Young throws a million checkdowns. There you go.
true, true, true,
The
true.
running back.
That is very true. Okay, all right, I'm gonna put this last final rule in just for the Carolina side. I'll rerun it and then I'll bring both of our faces up here. So let's get that in here, build lineups, and then we'll see what comes up. All right. Let's go back to us together. There we are. Okay. Let's close out the show here, Jack, as we're building. We don't want to run too long here. Let's just give some picks, thoughts, each position.
Yeah.
Favorite play, favorite leverage, each position. Favorite overall play at quarterback.
Quarterback. I'm probably gonna go Pickett. I think he crushed the preseason. They had an extremely tough matchup against maybe the best team in football last week. Um, People are gonna be down on that, and plus to your point about the Saints wide receivers being so highly projected, I think a lot of optimizers are just gonna shove Carr in there. Watson will have the highest projection, so yeah, I think he's the one like higher upside quarterback that's low. So that's definitely my favorite.
Yeah, I agree. I think in small field, I would probably play Carr. I think.
Yep.
And then I agree. Large field, Young. You and I were having a discussion today. Do we even leave Young out? But at 5% on DraftKings, a little bit higher on FanDuel, as the salaries are tighter over there. I think Young you still probably include. Can he outscore these guys? Yes, right. He was a top 3 draft pick, right, in the real NFL draft. So yes, Bryce Young can outscore these guys despite how poor he's looked so far. I think you include him. But as far as favorite leverage, I agree. It is Kenny Pickett. All right, running back. Let me go back to DraftKings here just so we can get on the same page. All right, running back. Favorite overall running back. Favorite leverage running back.
Um, well, we're probably gonna be the only show that doesn't say Nick Chubb, right? Um, I'm probably gonna say Harris. I just feel like he has the multi-touchdown, 25 touch upside. I know he's splitting, but it just seems like 40-ish% is very low for his upside. And I mean leverage. I'd go Hubbard just because he's getting close to half the work and he's sub 10%.
I guess there aren't that many options to choose from, so we're going to agree on a lot of these guys. I agree.
Yeah.
Chuba Hubbard's the best leverage play at given his workload. And it wasn't like he was just getting early downs. It wasn't like he got in the game when it was a blowout. He was mixing in on all downs early and often. So I think Chuba Hubbard, we have him projected for. Let me see. Actually, the lineup's just built here. So let me look at ownership. Chuba Hubbard, we have projected for just 5% on DraftKings. So hell yeah, that is the guy. And as you'll see here for you guys who are looking at the lineup builder here on screen, Jack, you can't see it. I'll just describe to you. All those running back plus quarterback plus defense or running back plus quarterback lineups are now gone. We still have a Watson, Chubb, Ford, Browns defense lineup with Njoku. That 5-man lineup, that kind of lineup makes sense to me in a Browns blowout or onslaught.
Just Browns score 24 points and every other team on the slate scores 13 because they're horrible.
Onslaught is relative for sure.
Yeah, I'll let you go first on the wide receiver so that I don't get to pick the limited options first every time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So favorite overall is probably, I mean, this is a very boring pick. I think it's Olave. Carolina down another cornerback. Favorite low owned would probably be, I mean, okay, so I'll go like regular low owned, and that'll be Allen Robinson. And then super low owned is Laviska Shenault, who I mentioned earlier.
All right, I was thinking Chark.
Mm.
I mean, he can play. He'll probably be, what do we have him at, like 5%?
Yeah, if that.
He might creep up to 10. But yeah, it looks like, I mean, the wide receiver options are really nice tonight, right? I mean, Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin, Mingo, Chark, all like professional players that are in the 10% to 5% owned category. They're going to be on the field a lot. So it's super easy way to get unique tonight, which is, some very, sometimes on these slates, you're reduced to playing like a wide receiver 4 and hoping he catches a bomb. And we don't have to do that tonight, which is awesome.
I mean, yeah, on Josh Allen slates, it's like, oh my God, please Khalil Shakir catch one catch. Right? That's what you're praying for. Tonight, it's like actual wide receiver 1s and 2s that are going to be on the field for 80-90% of the snaps. So it's a much different slate. All right, I'm going to take tight end 2 first since you
go for it.
Oh fuck, it's gross. I'll go.
I left you the scraps,
dude. I mean, there's like 5 guys to pick from. So Favorite, since we said Pickett, I'll go for Iremouth. I'll let you get the low owned option.
Yeah, I think I'll just take Hurst. I mean, I'm just like he's gonna go sub 10%, and he's gonna be on the field a bunch, and quarterback. We have very limited sample size, but again, if they get down and it's like check down garbage time city, you can see him being optimal easily.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to do it for this video. It has run long. Let's close it out with just a summary and then maybe some more lineup builder features that are coming in the very near future for short slates in particular. So I'll hit the summary. Jack, you hit the lineup builder features, and then we'll get out of here. So summary for short slates. Leave salary in larger contests. Try to get closer to the salary cap in smaller contests, although that's a difficult challenge tonight in any contest size based on the players. Correlate as much as possible. No correlation is too much on any site on a 2-game slate. 4-2 is really the sweet spot when it comes to smaller contests. Try to play one lower owned guy. The more salary you leave, the more correlation you have, the less you can focus on playing a guy that's under 20, 15%. For this slate in particular, salary is basically non-existent. Nick Chubb is going to break the record for ownership on a 2-game slate, and anything can happen with these 4 offenses. It could be a low-scoring slate. You might see some really weird winners, so don't be afraid to get weird. And just check your lineups. And the main question after you build a lineup is, who can I upgrade to, and does it make sense to not upgrade to that player based on the contest? I think that covers it. So Jack, just talk to us about the lineup builder features you got coming down the road here.
I will. First, I'd be remiss to not mention my Mitchell Trubisky jersey.
Oh
here.
yes, my bad. That's my bad.
Very much channeling the should you play bad quarterbacks on short slates. 2 of my 4 wins were Mitch Trubisky. He was not the best quarterback on the slate in either one, but it works. So do it. And as far as lineup builder, so Brian, showed you kind of some of the tools, and there's a lot of different ways you can use the lineup builder to optimize for these short slates. With different rules with and against quarterbacks and with and against defenses. The next version, actually, Brian and I are beta testing it tonight. We'll let you know how it goes. Hopefully, we get a nice win to show with it. But we just put some effort to streamline a lot of those features and make it even more intuitive. So you can still do everything on the live site right now, but it'll be easier and just quicker to make some of those rules in the future. And I think, Brian, we have another 2-game Monday next week. Is that right?
We do. I don't know why, but yes, we do.
All right, so we'll be back at it, I think, with some of that. So yeah, and what do you think about late swapping tonight? Do you try to do it, or is the 1 hour difference kind of not enough?
Yeah, I just don't think you can. I'm not sure what information you can gather unless like someone gets hurt immediately or something. I don't know. I'm just not sure what could happen.
Yep. So don't have to do that this time. Just set your lineups and enjoy. But yeah, good luck, everyone.
All right, let's get us both back on screen here. That'll do it for this video. We appreciate you watching, as always. Make sure you are subscribed here on YouTube. It is free to do. Just click subscribe right below this video. That'll get you notified whenever we go live, upload any new videos. Generally, these Monday and Thursday videos are Showdown specific. I post them early in the mornings. But as we get random 2-gamers mixed in, and then later in the season, once we get Saturday and other day slates, we may do live streams. So just being subscribed is the best way to get notified what our plans are. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. We appreciate it. Lets us know that we should continue to do these videos. We got 100 plus likes for the last couple of videos. Jack's here. Let's get 200 plus likes for him just to show some love for him and to him take time out of his day to do this video. Any questions you have, comment on the video. Gladly we'll get back to you before the slate begins tonight. I know a lot of you guys have opinions and want to talk it out amongst yourselves. Go and leave your opinions below too and talk it out with others. If you want to talk to us directly, you want to chat with other members of the OccupyFantasy.com community, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. The link is in the description below. The lineup builder you saw on screen, OccupyFantasy.com/lineup builder, plans as low as $11 per week. And our daily plug is actually going to be out by the time this video posts that highlights our top plays and lineup construction tips for specific contests for tonight's slate. OccupyFantasy.com is where you can get all of that. So for Jack, at DFS_magic_ on Twitter. A little late to the party, had to get 2 underscores in the username. You can follow him there. And I'm at Brian Jester FF.
Who is it? Come on. I just want to know who it is. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked that multiple people had a DFS Magic username. So that'll do it. At OccupyFantasy on Twitter, OccupyFantasy.com is where you can find all the information. For Jack, I'm Brian. Good luck in tonight's 2-game slate.